Adam said he's coming too.
Yeah. Okay. Welcome, guys, to Trek Live, episode 29, I believe. 29 of these
29.
Things. Tonight we're talking some Star Trek Discovery. Like always, past couple weeks, that's what we've been doing. With me, as always, is Bill. How you doing tonight, Bill?
Doing great.
Yep.
Doing great. Looking forward to talking about this one. This is a packed, I say this every week, but this is a packed episode with a lot of stuff.
I feel like it gets packed even more packed every week.
It does.
Yeah.
I think it really does. The more involved the plot gets and more elements get thrown into it, it's a rich show with a lot happening. So looking forward to diving in.
Yeah. Want to say hello to Jordan, also Adam. Hey guys, glad you guys
Jordan
can join
and Adam.
us.
Thanks for coming, guys. Look forward to hearing what you have to say about the episode and Discovery as a whole.
Yep.
Like up to this point, we haven't. Anybody who is like stopping in tonight that hasn't been here the last couple of weeks, or obviously Jordan was on a few weeks ago. But if you want to, give us your take on anything, Discovery or Star Trek related, of course. But let us know what you think of the show as a whole and the last few episodes, and we'll go off course when we have to and talk about whatever you guys want to talk about.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and the kind of the forewarning, there's going to be a bunch of spoilers, so just forewarned. And also, I just want to take a brief moment to say, because I got fired up today because I was listening to someone with a different opinion than mine about Discovery. I had to take a deep breath and be like, all right, they're entitled to their opinion. So that's what we want to preach here. I know both Bill and I are really positive on Discovery, but definitely challenge Discovery, and we want to hear from different perspectives, and
sure,
that's what makes it cool. So
absolutely, it is. Yeah. As long as it's like a constructive conversation and like it's respectful and constructive, it's all good. Like we want to hear contrarian takes and people who don't see things all the same way. But yeah, so give us your honest opinions. Don't go positive just because we're positive. Don't sugarcoat. Yeah.
Yep.
So real quick, before we get started with this episode, have you watched any more Enterprise this week?
Yes, I have to look up what I'm on. What is the episode after Awakening?
Kirshara, the last of the Vulcan, like 3-parter. Like
that's what
after the 3-parter.
Yeah, the Kirshara. I watched that, and then I also watched
Daedalus.
Yeah, Daedalus. Transporter. Yeah, the transporter episode.
Cool.
So those are the two I've watched in this past week. It's kind of settling down almost a little bit. So I'm excited to see where it goes, though.
Yeah, you got about half a season left, and you got some good stuff coming.
Yep.
Some bigger story arcs and a couple big 2-parters that at least one of them might impact some Discovery stuff that's coming from what rumors are out there. So your timing might be right on the money. You might be hitting that 2-parter right when Discovery kind of goes to the same place. So yeah. Can't wait to hear what you have to say when the show's over. And I think it's going to line up perfectly. I think you're probably like on pace to wrap up Enterprise right when Discovery's kind of going on a break. So sure, when Discovery's off the air and we have a couple weeks to talk about more traditional, like old school Trek Live topics, one of those topics will definitely be an Enterprise recap.
Yep.
Yeah, like we did with Voyager, where we kind of dive right in and go season by season and talk about episodes, characters, and all there is to talk about with Enterprise. So, and you know me, I'm always down for Enterprise conversation. So that's a big one for me.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess we can just dive right in if you'd like.
Absolutely.
What is your overall take? Just kind of summarize your overall feelings about the episode.
Well, I've kind of been I ask this question of you every week as we've kind of gone along. I kind of ask you like where this most recent episode kind of slots in. Like, is it your favorite? Where does it fall in the rankings? And I'm a chicken and hedge when I get the question myself. And this week I feel confident in saying that this is my favorite episode so far.
Okay.
This is at the top of my list as of right now. Where in previous weeks I haven't necessarily felt like that confident, and I'm sure we'll get into why. Like there's a lot here to talk about, but this one came together for me in a way that not necessarily. I'm not saying the other episodes didn't, but this one kind of went up a notch for me. It was beyond what some of the other episodes have been. This one approached like classic Star Trek territory for me in some ways. So I've seen it twice now. I watched it when I got home from work. And the second viewing was better than the first, and not just for episode reasons. We kind of talked about this off air, but CBS All Access had some issues last night.
Yes.
So the experience last night wasn't like super great. It was kind of rough, and some buffering stuff. The quality of the image wasn't great. There was some skipping, and I had to rewind a couple of times. Like being able to watch it a second time without any of that stuff going on definitely helped. And second viewings of this show always help anyway for me because it's so dense and there's so much stuff going on. So real quick before I ask you, hi Enterprise Extra, welcome. Thanks for coming by again. Yeah, appreciate it. But what do you think, Dan?
I think you're exactly right. They definitely turned up everything. They turned up the drama. They turned up the kind of sci-fi stuff. Just what's going on in the episode. Just a bunch of stuff going on in the episode. I loved this episode, but it's right there. It's my second favorite. I think Choose Your Pain is still my favorite. I don't think I've made that on air, but that's Choose Your Pain is my favorite so far, but this is like right there. And probably next week it'll be my favorite. So yeah, but overall it's definitely a great episode. There's a lot going on, a lot of action sequences, a lot of talking heads. I could get into the camera work of the talking heads.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what you kind of just alluded to there is part of why I think this one stacks so high for me. It's visually dynamic and interesting and different than anything not only that we've seen in Discovery so far, but it goes to places visually that Star Trek's never been ambitious. I don't want to say it hasn't been ambitious enough, but it's just it hasn't been there. Like they haven't gone that way, like that kind of boldly audaciously weird in their imagery, in the dream sequence kind of stuff. And I kind of thought that was cool. It was unexpectedly different and just interesting visually. And that really worked for me right off the bat. Something that I kind of expressed not some ambivalence, or I don't want to say I was negative, but like I had questions about the long range mind meld that we saw in episode 2 between Sarek and Burnham, and I was like, I get it, like Vulcan mysticism, there's all kinds of stuff, and I there's room for, just because Tuvok couldn't do it when he was on Voyager doesn't mean Sarek can. Like there's all kinds of reasons that could work, but I liked that this episode provided some context for that and told us why Sarek's able to do that, and just added wrinkles to that whole thing, and it didn't just leave it sitting there as like, oh, we're just doing this because we want to add and do things that are just convenient for the plot, and we'll kind of deal with it. It makes sense to me. Like they gave an explanation that I hear and I go, yep, good enough for me, full speed ahead. And I appreciated that. Is that something like did you notice that? Did that work for you?
It worked for me. I'm kind of glad that they at least made an effort to kind of tie up those loose ends, because I like that I'm guessing the writers, they can anticipate this being like, okay, the fans, they're going to be like, what? No, that can't happen. But then, later on it gets resolved. So I think it's definitely props to the writers to be able to at least try to make an attempt, which I think it worked for me. So good job. They did their job.
Yeah, I think so too. The other big thing for me, I think Michael Burnham's character came to life in a way in this episode that, not to say she hadn't before, but this episode shed new light and added new layers and texture to her that in a way that I really appreciated. I think she was more complicated, and I saw the Vulcan human conflict more in a more interesting way. You know, she wasn't, not to say, you know, I've heard some criticisms in some more negative reviews out there that she's kind of just acting Vulcan with emotion popping in when it's convenient. Like, I don't necessarily agree with that. I think it's more complicated and it's better than that. But I think that criticism and that kind of position is harder to take because of this episode. I think this episode does a really good job of showing us both sides of it, and kind of attacking it head on. And I think this episode's kind of about that for her. That's her arc in this episode. And kind of going along with that, you know, one of the things that I really I'm surprised by with this show, that I really didn't see coming. This is more episodic than I expected. You know, each of the last 4 episodes, really all of the episodes, the first 2 are kind of their own combined thing.
Yeah.
And it's certainly its own thing story-wise. Like it's very much a prologue. But from Context is for Kings to this one, it's certainly over an arc. Like there's an arc that's pulling from episode 1 to now. But each episode has its own distinct personality in a way that old Trek did. And I appreciate that it's not so married to the arc that the episodes can't have variety and can't approach, you know, genre the way that Star Trek's always been so good at. You know, the Context is for Kings goes to like horror places, and you know, this is like straight character drama and kind of talky and in a good way. You know, it can do all these things. It can cover all these bases. It's not so married to the arc that it has to be one thing all the time. Yeah. And I'm glad. I've talked about that on this show before. That you know, one of my favorite things about Trek is that it's versatile and it can do all these different things. And Discovery is proving that with an arc you can still do that. And it's reassuring to me that we're not losing that with this show. So that's huge for me. And this episode kind of hit the nail on the head that way. It really convinced me that that's what the show's going to be. Yeah. Because it is so different than the past few episodes. This is like its own thing. And I didn't necessarily expect to get that out of this show. Yeah. So, yeah. Enterprise Extras flooding with all kinds of good stuff. He's got his current Trek rank for Discovery up at the top there, with some bold choices that I know. I think your 2 favorite episodes are his 2 bottom episodes, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know. I think you said this one was probably your 2, but I know you had Butcher's Knife pretty high up there.
Yeah, it's up there. It's like 2 or 3, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm with him on Context is for Kings. I love Context is for Kings. He's got that at 1. I think I would have that at 2 right now behind Lethe, I think is pronounced. I have to figure that out.
Yeah, me
exactly
too.
How it's pronounced. I'm going to hedge and dance around that title all night, I'm sure. But that's my favorite so far for sure. But Context is for Kings and this one are kind of neck and neck for me as like the highlights of the show so far. Yeah, and Jordan makes the point. He says that this episode is the definition of coloring between the canon lines. It does. There's some interesting stuff that I definitely want to ask you about. One in particular that I see a lot of discussion on.
Yeah, they're definitely dancing. Maybe not coloring, but they're dancing.
They're dancing over some stuff. Making some bold choices that they're inviting conversations and in interesting ways. Yeah, Enterprise Extra says it felt like old school Trek with the trip into Burnham's mind, like so many Trek episodes before, with the journey into ethereal places like Extreme Measures, Facets, Remember, The Inner Light, Dark Page, even Move Along Home. Yeah, that's exactly right. It falls into that lineage of episodes. And I thought that there were even just like scenes where Burnham is laying on the bed in the shuttle with Tilly, like putting the equipment on her and talking about, you know, I'm going in, don't pull me out, like let me go. I heard that and I was like, this is like directly out of even Voyager. I can picture like scenes of
Tuvok and
going into mind melts and stuff. Don't pull me out. Let me do this. Yeah. So there's a clear like knowledge, I think, of beats, moments, scenes from previous Trek that they're kind of walking right up to and touching. And I think that's really cool. It's making me think of old Trek in ways that are nothing but good. So.
Yeah.
Really happy about that. What did you think? Just get it right off at the gate before we go any further, and I forget about it. What did you think when they were basically in a holodeck
I
simulation?
knew that was gonna be it. I knew that was
Like,
gonna be it. That's been a hot topic all
it's a hot
day.
topic.
Yeah, even like during the episode. Like, I wasn't sure how I felt about it. I was like, that's gonna make a lot of people mad. Like, I don't.
Yeah.
I know that the technology is out there because we've seen it in Enterprise before Starfleet had it. So I'm like, okay, this is not new for the time, but it's not what Starfleet has. And I was like, I don't know. And then TrekCore posted a picture on Twitter, and it's like, before you guys freak out, and it was from the animated series.
Animated series.
So I thought that was funny. But I don't know how I feel. I feel like there was other ways they could have approached that scene, but
yeah,
yeah,
it's one of those things for me that I can't sit here and say that I have like strong feelings about. Like I can work it out in my head. I can make it work and think of it like. I've heard them say this in panels and stuff where they'll talk about, the Enterprise is out there. It's been out there. And this is a newer ship than the Enterprise and Constitution class ships. So it stands to reason that this ship would have technology that, the Enterprise and Constitution class ships don't have. And I agree with Enterprise Extra, what he just said. A holographic is very different than a hologram. Like there is a distinct, like we haven't seen through this simulation like that they were doing. This is a battle simulation. This is like virtual reality in a way that's that we might see in our lifetime. Like we're relatively young, and it's we're on that track, and there's a difference between having a simulation like that and having a simulation like we see in TNG and Voyager, where you're like interacting with people with stories developing around you, and it's immersive and for recreation as much as it's for simulation. So I can kind of accept that, when Riker walks into the holodeck and encounter at Farpoint and is like amazed, he's amazed at the level of detail and the immense, like the immersion and the ability to do all these new things. It's not so much that the holodeck itself is new. It's the awe in Riker's eyes in the beginning when he first walks into it and encounter Farpoint is more about technological, technology moving forward and getting better than, oh my gosh, this is a brand new thing I've never seen before. That already didn't make sense because, like you said, in Enterprise, in Unexpected, for example, when Trip gets pregnant, he walks on working on the ship and he's in a holodeck. That's exactly like the holodecks that you see for the most part, like you see in modern Trek. And it's a story point in the episode. They're very much aware that this technology is out there, and really, I can, now that that's there and now that that's part of the canon, is it really going to take Starfleet 200 years to figure that technology out themselves? No, I don't think so. That's a long time. And I just, in the 23rd century, I have a hard time believing that we won't be far ahead of even that in reality, because we're already almost there. So it is what it is. It's, it doesn't bother me. I do think, when you do that, you're inviting conversations that aren't fun to listen to. Really, even doing it, like when people attack the show for it, it's inviting criticism that makes it challenging for the show. So I can't sit here and say, like, if I was running the show, I would have done that exact thing. I probably might have made a different choice to avoid the whole problem. But does it bother me personally? No, because I think it's fairly easy to come up with an explanation for why it makes sense.
And I think
it's already kind of there.
Yeah, and I think the people behind it, like running the show and stuff, I think they did this on purpose, because if you think, like, maybe let's say they go the Enterprise route where it's just reading the holodeck or reading the cargo bay, shooting that thing around. That's not like an awe moment. Like the awe moment is the holodeck or whatever it is. But it gets people talking, and I think that they do that because keep the show relevant. I think they did. Maybe they did that because, or they put the F-bomb in there because they wanted to get people talking about it. So
and it works.
And it works. So
people have an opinion, and and you're right, it does. I mean, so far in a lot of these episodes, we've had something, whether it's the holodeck or the F-bomb, that like is a wow moment, and it gets people all fired up and talking about it. So yeah, it makes sense. I get why they're doing it. And Enterprise Extra agrees with you, Dan. Correct, Dan? That's the reason. And Yep. Ripped away. Yep. Absolutely. So I'm fine with it. Just like I very quickly got used to we have holographic communication in the show. Like that's already there. So if they can have a hologram of Admiral Cornwell walking around talking to Captain Lorca, then it stands to reason that you can walk into a room that's designed to create a virtual reality and have a battle simulation in it. You know, it's not a hard leap to make. So there'll be people out there who just won't accept it, and it'll be one more reason why they're angry at the show and don't accept it, and that's fine. But for those of us who can be a little more open-minded and think about it and be accepting of some change, I think we'll be fine. We'll live. Yeah. Adam says the all moment was the continually spawning Klingons, and it worked. Yeah. Yeah. So what else stood out to you, real quick? I know you have some notes jotted down.
Well, just kind of trying to keep it in line, transitioning from like kind of holodeck thing to Ash Tyler a little bit, because he kind of proves himself to the captain, so to speak. What do you think of Ash Tyler? I know there's a bunch of theories out there from last week's episode. Now this week, is the dust gonna settle, or are you still weary of his character?
I don't think it's as simple as he's a Klingon in disguise. The timeline of the show indicates that he was the Choose Your Pain takes place 3 weeks after Butcher's Knife.
Yep.
So I don't believe that if it is indeed Vok, that in 3 weeks Vok has learned, not only been surgically altered to appear human, but learned to pass as a human.
Yeah, I can speak perfect
English, and not even just speak the language, but like be conversant and have conversations with Michael and with the captain the way that he is. I just don't buy it. It's not. I just don't think it's credible. And if they do go that route, I'll have questions. But I do believe that he's a plant of some kind. I can foresee, some way that, he's a Federation Starfleet officer who was captured at the Battle of Binary Stars and has somehow been, linked with Vok or something. There's going to be some kind of, I believe there's going to be some kind of like science fiction tech reason that, either Vok is kind of incorporated into him somehow, or he's controlling him somehow, or they're using him as a so Enterprise Extra articulating it better than I. He says clearly, if it's Vok, they have a way to wipe his mind in a way that he no longer knows himself, and the real Tyler has been imprinted on him. That's my thought. That's exactly what I think. It's some way that Vok's on top of him. Like there's some way that it's Tyler. It's a real human security officer, and he's unwillingly, kind of like the in Deep Space Nine. There's an episode where they try to convince Kira that she's one of these sleeper agents that they sent to Bajor, and doesn't know it. Like they're so, they're so sleeper that they don't know. Like they're completely unaware that they're actually a Cardassian. They appear Bajoran, they live a Bajoran life, and they can be activated and bring all their intelligence back. I think it's going to be something like that. And
Go ahead.
I hope it's something like that because I like Ash Tyler. I like the actor. I like the performance that he's giving. I think there's real dramatic potential there for a character who's like trying to fight against that and trying to, hold on to his humanity. I think that's way more interesting than he's a Klingon in disguise. He's Arn Darvin, and just as simple as Arn Darvin, like Klingon disguised to look human and up to no good. If this was a 3-year gap where Vok could have gone away to some training facility to be conditioned to be human for years, I would buy it. But 3 weeks, I don't think so. Is that what you think?
No. Well, I mean, for me, it's like, okay, this smells like Battlestar Galactica. I don't know if you guys out there in chat have seen that.
Yeah.
It's similar, I think, and that's what made me think of it. I was like, is Ron Moore one behind this? Is he on the staff or something? I don't know, but I think yeah, definitely is similarities to Battlestar Galactica in that
it does.
People don't know that they're actually
a Cylon.
So
yeah, it's exactly what it feels like to me.
Yeah.
And that's fine. That's cool. Like I said, I think like Battlestar Galactica kind of was able to achieve. There's a lot of dramatic potential there for a character who's like struggling with this, and yeah, I think there's a lot of fertile ground that I think they're going to go to. Like I think that's where they're going, and I think that's going to be good. I think the actor's up to the task. I think we've seen that. I think he's really good in this episode. He's good in Choose Your Pain, but he's I think maybe a little more one note where he's kind of just a prisoner. Here he's
rat.
like exactly. Here he gets to stretch a little bit, and there's a little more to him. I think he's got a couple of great scenes with Burnham on the shuttle. And at the end of the mess hall, which I'm going to talk about in a bit, because that's a big scene for me, and why this episode's so high on my list. What did you think of the Lorca Cornwell dynamic?
Oh man, this Lorca's something else, man. He's walking that line again. He is walking that line of
it's crazy.
Is this guy a bad dude, or is he this guy trying to win the war? And it makes for great. Every time he's on screen, I'm like, oh, what is he gonna do next? I think it works. I think it's different from Trek. They it's definitely something we've never seen before. I didn't mind it. It makes for a great character drama, great kind of scenes between them two. Yeah, I'm excited to see where they go with that, and what do you think of it?
There's a lot more territory to explore there, but it harkened back to being the Enterprise fanboy that I am. It made me think of Archer and Hernandez, the episode that you guys just saw. Yeah. That felt reminiscent of that, where these two people have like a history and their positions and rank and all of kind of complicated things, and they have this moment where it all kind of comes crashing down, and it worked for me. I think it humanized Lorca, and they keep doing that. They keep adding layers to Lorca in a way that is fascinating to me, because I can't pin him down. Every week I come away thinking different things. After the third episode, I'm thinking, man, it's really leaning the way of he's going to be like Garth and other captains from like the original series and other shows, where he's like, he's gone. Like he's crossed the moral threshold. He's not a good dude anymore. And then in Butcher's Knife, I came away thinking the total opposite. I thought he's just kind of skirting the line. Like he's willing to push moral boundaries like Sisko was during his war, and he's going to be okay. And then Choose Your Pain, with the reveal of what he did to his ship, it kind of adds more questions.
Yeah,
and this
like,
one kind of does too. I just don't know what to think. And it's cool. I like that. I like having a mystery behind this guy, and that he's complicated, and he's not just one thing. And I'm well on the record saying that Captain Picard, Jean-Luc Picard, is my favorite character in fiction. 100%. And those other captains are right there with him. But sometimes those captains, Picard's an extremely complicated character. Like he has a rich history and all this stuff. He's amazing. But they can sometimes fall into like archetype territory, where you know exactly what they are. They're well defined, know what box they fit in. And that's not to say all the time for 7 seasons. They all have moments and interesting stuff that happens to them, and layers revealed and stuff. But this is like the complete extreme of that, where every episode we're learning something new and getting new feels for this guy. And Jason Isaacs is the perfect actor for that, because he's so good at yeah, he's amazing at giving off these differing signals about what he's up to. I had this question asked of me. Danielle, who's in here, I was talking to before we started this about the episode, and she asked me if I thought that Lorca knew exactly what was going to happen to Cornwell at the end. Do you think he knew exactly what was going to happen to Cornwell at the end?
Yeah, and just to tie into this whole thing, Adam makes a great point. It's like, do you think expected the shuttle to kind of blow up? I think Lorca knew. I think Lorca knew. But that just makes him so dangerously mysterious. It's like he knows how to play the game. This is his game. This is war. This is it's so messy, and he's so good in a mess, in a complicated situation. And
He's a mess.
I think he knew. But
see, I think like I said to Danielle earlier, I think he saw it as going one of two ways. Either it's successful and she goes and she has this breakthrough negotiation with the Klingons and the war is on its way to ending. And at that point, you know what? Maybe he's okay with kind of stepping away and being done. Like at this point, he seems like he's pretty much a creature of this war, and he's kind of on a one-man wrecking ball mission to end it as fast as possible. If it ends the war, it ends the war, and he'll fine. He'll step away. And if it fails, she's probably not going to come back. Like if this doesn't go well, something like this is going to happen.
But he still gets to keep his ship. So
I think he calculated it as it's a win-win for him.
A win-win.
The war's going to end because she's successful and the whole dynamic changes and no big deal. Or it fails and she's in big trouble and problem solved.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, it's complicated with him. Like I was saying, is he a bad dude for that? Yeah. Like, is he? He's morally questionable. Like that's just the only way to say it. Like I don't know what's in his head. There's more to be revealed. I think that's what's going on there. But he's interesting to think about. I spend a lot of time thinking about Captain Lorca, and I love that about the show. I don't know what I expected. We talked about this before the show even started, that we had, I think we both kind of expressed some mixed feelings about, is he going to be just a bad captain? Is that going to be the way they go?
Yeah.
And I know I was kind of not necessarily thrilled with that idea, and I'm just really grateful that it's more complex than that. They keep changing it up and making it more interesting as we go.
Yep.
Yeah. Let's see. Jordan says that he sympathizes with him and he kind of agrees with him. You need a fanatical, devoted captain to conquer the situation, a Sisko over a Picard. I know Jordan has said this to me many times, that like Picard in Deep Space Nine's, Picard and Sisko's job in his situation, not real sure how that would go. You know, Picard is a captain of a certain type and of a certain, most comfortable in a certain situation, and the challenges that Sisko had. It would have pushed Picard into some pretty uncomfortable positions, and he probably wouldn't have done some of the things that Sisko did. And the war was won because of some of those choices Sisko made. So who knows what happens in that position? And he's probably right. And I've kind of agreed with this from the beginning, that Lorca is very much like a Sisko kind of guy. And even Picard came back broken like Lorca when he was pushed. If you connect chain of command to first contact, absolutely, yeah. Picard does
spot on.
Have some damage that he has to deal with. Do you think it's right for Cornwell to take Lorca's command based on revelations she gained so intimately? That's a good question, Danielle. Was Admiral Cornwell acting professionally?
Yeah, on the record or off the record.
Yeah, can you imagine that meeting with like the board of Starfleet admirals? How she figured this out? Like, you're really gonna go back to the board of the Starfleet chain of command to say, I stumbled into this information. I stumbled into this opinion, and I don't know. It's tough.
Yeah,
how does
her report start? Yeah, well, the whiskey started flowing, and
exactly. That'd be an uncomfortable conversation for Admiral to have. because she does come across that in a, but I kind of think that's in a way that's kind of similar to the stuff we're talking about with Lorca. I kind of think Cornwell was digging for this kind of stuff. I think Cornwell's kind of been obvious from the beginning since we saw her for the most part last week. Last week was kind of our formal introduction to her as a character. We saw her, I think, before that, but we got a good sense of her dynamic with Lorca last week on Choose Your Pain at the beginning of the episode, and she's kind of expressing some concern about his state of mind and what he's up to and how he's doing and should he really be in this position. So I'm not convinced that Admiral Cornwell wasn't seeking this information by any means necessary. I think she's understandably concerned. She knows Lorca really well. She sees the differences in him between now and when she knew him before, and is concerned that in command of this prototype ship that's so critical to the success of the war, if he's not stable, if he's doing crazy stuff and not making good decisions, if you're the admiral and admiral, you have reason to be concerned. And I think she was seeking information and got it, but through some questionable means for sure. I can understand that she wants to ensure that the Discovery has a stable captain, Lorca gets help, etc. But I think that it's a bit crappy of her because he passed all official tests. That's right. They do make a point to say that he did pass all the Starfleet tests to get back into command after that incident with his last ship. So that's a really good point.
Yeah.
So yet again, what we have here, I think, is a character, Cornwell, like many of our other characters, who are ambiguous, who don't necessarily make the right choice every single time. It's complicated. Like they're not down the middle, straight line, straight edge, right call, ethical call every single time. Sometimes people make bad choices to get to the right thing. It's things happen for complicated reasons.
Yep, it's not black and white. It's somewhere in between. It's gray. And that's what it makes it for an awesome show, I think.
It does, yeah. I think we're seeing a lot of that in the show. We're seeing characters who are trying to get to the right place, but just don't know how to get there. They make bad decisions to get there.
Yeah.
Yep. Here's a question: What did you think of Stamets? Like crazy hippie Stamets.
To me, he seemed different, and I know we haven't seen a lot of his character beforehand, or. But at the same time, it's like he seems different, but also like something crazy just happened. He figured out his life's work.
Yeah.
He figured out how to. So I mean, he's. At the same time, I get why people say like, "Oh, he seems a little bit different," but also like, look what he has done. He's accomplished what he's set out to do. I would be as excited and as groovy as him. So it's. I get why he's like that. So.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That's a really good point. And he was, when we saw him initially, we saw him kind of at his low where nothing was working. He couldn't figure it out. And he's in this terrible situation where he's pissed off that his work is being used for reasons he doesn't want to use for, and everything's going bad. Nothing's going right. So you're right. And we don't know what he was like before the war, or what he was like when he was testing all this stuff. Maybe he was, who knows? But it's interesting and complicated. I think they're pretty well telegraphing that he's experiencing some side effects from being linked with. I guess they're using him because they jump a couple of times in this, or at least once.
Yeah.
And tardigrade's obviously gone, so I assume he keeps going back in there, and it is being used like the tardigrade.
Which Adam is asking.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's implied.
Yeah. I think that's where they're going. I think that's what they're doing. I think he's being used in that way, and I think he's happy to be used that way. He kind of says it in I think it's The Butcher's Knife. He says, "I always wanted to talk to my mushrooms." Like that's what he wants to be. To be like on the ground level, like figuring this out and doing it himself. And that's what he's doing. He's right on, hands on, physically making it happen. And I think that's what comes into play with you, Dan. I think maybe that's why Culber, we haven't seen a lot of like his reaction to all of this, but maybe he's like, hey, he's just happy everything's going right for a change. And the people who, I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see where they go with it. Like I said, I think they're pretty clearly going in a direction of weird stuff's happening because of the spores and stuff, and not just because of what they're telegraphing, but because I think we're on edge and knowing that the spore drive is going to be here in the future. Like clearly something has to happen that prevents it from being the form of propulsion for the next 100 years that we see. So this seems like a pretty clear avenue to take to have that out. I did have something else I wanted to ask you.
What do you think about Tilly and Michael Burnham's relationship? I'll throw that out there.
I think this was their best episode together because I thought they were more on equal footing in this one. I think I like that Tilly introduces Burnham as her mentor, but in practice, what you kind of see is Tilly is as much Burnham's mentor as the other way around. Like you see them, their whole interaction with Ash Tyler in that scene. You know, Tilly's the one pushing her to you know, be human, like in the way she's interacting with people. So Burnham's kind of, I think, gaining her humanity back through Tilly, and Tilly's learning about being on a starship and having a career and all that stuff through Burnham. So I like that it's a give and take kind of deal, and I think this episode does the best job yet of showing that it's a two-way street.
Yeah, I think they're both really good for each other. I think Tilly definitely is growing on me. I think she's becoming more relatable because I feel like most of us aren't at the top of whatever we're doing. We're, you know, in the trenches working, and I think she is at the same point. And she, you know, she doesn't know what to do. She's just running, and I think it's cool to see the relationship. I also have a point about the running. Whenever I see Michael Burnham run, I feel like she's running like a Vulcan. Like, I feel like that's T'Pol running. I was like,
exactly.
What?
That's exactly. Yep.
How can you not say that she's acting like a Vulcan? She runs like one.
I thought the exact same thing.
Yeah.
I saw some people criticizing that and saying, why does she look so unnatural running? And you're exactly right.
I just think of Tuvok running on Voyager the same way. It's just like, I don't know.
Yeah, it's very exaggerated, and the arms are moving in a certain way. But you're right. I can picture in my head, as I was watching it, I was picturing in my head T'Pol running. And what episode it was. And that's exactly. It's almost like she studied the episode where T'Pol was running and ran the same way. I took it as a very conscious choice, and you're the man, Dan, for because you are exactly right. I'm even more proud that it's an Enterprise reference that you nailed. So so the scene that I was kind of hinting at earlier, I kind of hit on. My favorite scene in Discovery so far is in this episode, and it's the scene at the end of the episode between Ash Tyler and Burnham, where we haven't even talked about the whole Sarek dynamic yet, so we have to go back to that. But we're kind of dancing around like the main thrust of the episode. But I do, now that I'm talking about it, you know, the scene between Burnham and Tyler, and Burnham, you know, after she met with Sarek in sickbay, and she's talking about all these conflicting emotions and not understanding what she's feeling, and Ash Tyler kind of just simply responds like, "Oh, sounds like
it means to be human."
Star Trek to me. Like, that's exactly Trek. And I think Sonequa Martin Green's performance in that scene is the best she's been. She was incredible in that scene. So yeah, that to me was like, that floored me, and mostly because of her performance and the chemistry of those two actors, and the dialogue just felt Trek to me. I knew I was watching Star Trek. Like, you close your eyes and hear the dialogue, and you go, that's Star Trek dialogue, talking about what it means to be human, and battle of emotion, and your intellect and your mind and everything kind of clashing together, and that's fertile territory for Trek that has been well explored in the past, but this is doing it in a whole new way, and it's beautifully played by her, and it just totally won me over, and so. What do you think? That scene work for you?
It worked for me. I was like, yes. I don't know why people are like, this isn't Star Trek. This theme has been a steady. It's always been in Star Trek of exploring what it means to be human, and even just what Vulcan's struggling with what it means to be human, with Spock, all the Vulcans we've seen in the Prime timeline have struggled with this, and even with other species too. But I thought it was cool that they kind of ended the movie, the episode with that. I thought that was cool. It was like an homage, I think, but I thought it was really cool.
Yeah, I think that's what it was for me. I think it ended on such a high note with that it really pushed it up. And kind of doubling back here a little bit to, I think, what the real heart of the episode is, this whole Sarek dynamic. Just what did you think of Sarek in the episode? Like the whole, everything to do with him, the whole the mind, diving into his head, like seeing this scene play out, like that whole thing. Did it work for you? Was this?
I think it worked. I think it was like a Vulcan life crisis almost.
Yeah.
And I think it's cool that there maybe is a I think Burnham sees the bad side of keeping everything bottled up and not being fully truthful, and I feel
Such
like
a good point.
That was like almost a tipping point for her, and that's what kind of led into the scene in the cafeteria. So
yeah,
I thought that was just awesome.
Such a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and the thing that, to me, like the obvious, like canonista, like hardcore Star Trek fan stuff that just totally works for me is I think it's so cool, and it makes it worth. It makes making this show a prequel worth it. That it takes this story that's been there since the beginning, basically, with Sarek and Spock. We've always known, like going back all the way to the beginning, Journey to Babel, that Sarek and Spock don't speak for over a decade because Spock chose to go to Starfleet, and it's always been kind of it's just a difference between a father and a son, like happens often, but this adds texture and context to that in a way that
now we know why.
Awesome. Now we know why Sarek shuns him for a decade basically, and there's just no relationship, and why Sarek acts the way he acts when he gets to the Enterprise and Journey to Babel, where he literally doesn't acknowledge him. He doesn't want anything to do with Spock.
Mm-hmm.
I think this makes that whole thing more credible, and I totally bought it before. I totally bought it as just a father and a son who don't connect, and like I said, that happens every day in the world. But this is endlessly more interesting dramatically, and I love that what it's doing is taking established canon and just filling in, not even necessarily blanks, but just adding to it, just making it a little more rich and a little more textured. It just totally worked for me. That again, I just knew I was watching Star Trek, and that's what. Not to say that previous episodes didn't have me feeling that way. I have been a staunch defender of the show, as this is Star Trek. It's exploring Star Trek themes. It's attacking things in a Star Trek way. But because of the way that it approaches canon and just the Star Trek universe, the way it develops characters, this episode specifically, I think, really worked for me in a way that is unique to this episode, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. And like before, like I always, just for me, just my viewpoint, I always thought of Sarek as the bad guy. But now it's like it's much more complicated than that, which has been a theme throughout this whole show. It's just more complicated than that. So
that's exactly right. Yeah. You're so right. Yeah, because when you see it through Spock's eyes and Journey to Babel, all you see is like a stubborn dad.
Yeah.
Who's like just mad that his son didn't take the career path that he wanted him to take.
Yeah.
And I think in defense of like Journey to Babel and that whole dynamic, I think you see a little bit more there when you watch the episode with Amanda explaining stuff. There is some texture there and stuff, but you're right. Like because we're so connected with Spock in TOS, we're naturally kind of inclined to say Sarek's kind of got to stick up his butt. He's just kind of being a tough, P word. Like he's just being he's being just mean to be mean, kind of, and angry for reasons that we don't understand, and now we understand them. The anger and the emotion, dare I say, behind Sarek's reaction is exposed here. We know exactly why, and Yeah, I think it makes TOS better. I think it makes Journey to Babel better. So that's endlessly cool. And Enterprise kind of did that in ways sporadically in its run, where going back and being a prequel, like it added some texture to establish canon, sometimes in ways that weren't necessary, sometimes in ways that weren't necessarily good, but it sporadically achieved that. And in 6 episodes, Discovery's already kind of doing it, as the prequel, animal. So really, really cool. So the kind of combination between that stuff, Sarek Burnham, and the emotional beats with, like I said, the scene at the end and some others. The scene where Ash Tyler on the shuttle, like I kind of hinted at the beginning too. When the turn that's made in Burnham's head, where she kind of realizes, oh yeah, he's right. Like she's kind of assuming that Sarek is fixated on Burnham because he's disappointed in her.
Yes.
And Ash Taylor's like, no, when you think you're going to die, you're not thinking about anger and disappointment in somebody. You're thinking about yourself and who you love and how you affected the people that you love.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, yeah, that's right. And I think that's so good. I think it's well written. I think it's well played by the actors. Mm-hmm. And I just think it's so Trek, because it's exploring humanity in a way that only Trek can. Yeah. Putting us in situations that only Trek can put us in. Mm-hmm. Extremely, extremely successful episode for me.
Yep.
And I kind of said at the beginning too, and we kind of touched on it. I really liked the dream sequences as a whole. Like I just thought the choppiness, the weirdness of it, it just kind of worked for me. It was cool. It was different. Yeah. It was unlike anything we've seen in Trek before. We've seen dream sequences in Star Trek many times, mm-hmm. in all kinds of ways, and this was something different. And when you have 700 hours of Star Trek, that kind of all sporadically touch on similar kind of things, like mind, jumping into somebody's brain and having a connected mental moment, mind melds and stuff like that. This found a new way of conveying that, and I kind of really like that. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. So, did we miss anything? I'm sure we did, because there's so much. But
yeah.
What notes that we didn't touch on? Any character stuff? Any story beats? Anybody in the chat have anything?
Yeah.
Want to talk about? Do you want to hear about? One thing that Jordan did mention, I want to backtrack a little bit. He mentions that he loved Lorca's reaction to the Stamets stuff. Like when Lorca's like staring at Stamets, like what is going on here? And Stamets like walks away, and Lorca's like staring, looking at him.
Yeah.
Great stuff. Love that. I agree with Jordan there. Yeah. Exactly, Danielle.
Yeah. Right on the money.
She says that. Kind of like we were talking about before, this scene that we're talking about with Ash Tyler and Burnham at the end, it's further evidence to how Ash can't just be Vok with plastic surgery, because there's no way Vok would know. Like, they would be able to have a conversation about this, that's just being human.
Yeah.
After a few weeks of being human. So, yeah, totally agree with you there.
Yeah. A few more things. I love the camera work. I love just the close-ups. I think it kind of sealed the deal for me on the talent of this cast. Like that up close shot like forces you to not be able to just rely on the writing, but your emotions that you can convey through your face, and especially when Sarek and Michael Burnham, there's close-ups. Really great. I keep going back, but Captain Lorca, the phaser in the back of his pants, like they have holders that's a standard issue, but I guess that's his style. He's just a cowboy with
that's right,
a new shiny ship.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
Yep. No, I agree. I think you're right. I think the direction of this episode is really good, because it does give the actors room to emote and convey the story through their performances. I think they James Frain, especially Michael Burnham, Sonequa Martin Green, the scenes between them in the long distance mind meld, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Katra something, whatever it was, Katra something. I can't remember what the term was, but
Yeah.
A lot of it is done through close-ups, and it's all on their faces.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot, especially when you're dealing with Vulcans. There's a lot that's unsaid. They're not going to say these things outright. You have to convey it in other ways. And I think James Frain's great as Sarek. I think he does a great job.
Yes. Yep.
Very good casting. That's a tough role to cast.
Yep.
Given that he's been played by a couple actors. I think the actor who played Sarek in the 2009 movie is excellent. I think he's one of my favorite things in that movie. Actually, some of his scenes in that are great, and and obviously Mark Lenard. Originally, this is the third actor to play that role, and tough needle to thread to find an actor who can sell it and be believable and can ease right into it, and he has. He's sold for me. He's Sarek.
Yeah.
What'd you think of, real quick, just because it's like just a little throw out thing, but like at the very beginning of the episode, like the first shot of Vulcan, like the matte painting.
Loved it.
Right. Yeah.
I love those
Gorgeous.
establishing shots. I love Vulcan. Just even before this episode, it's one of my favorite planets. I love the architecture. It's so. I know we talk about how Klingon, culture is so Klingon. Well, I feel like this Vulcan is so Vulcan. So I liked it.
Yep, agreed. Right off the bat, as soon as the episode started, like first image of the episode, like on Vulcan, that matte painting, that wide shot, establishing shot, I was like, okay, here we go.
Yeah, we're on Vulcan. Yep.
Real.
Yeah.
Yeah, it totally worked for me. Beautiful to look at too. It's just gorgeous.
Yeah.
And it kind of reminded me of like old school Trek. Like it looked like a matte painting, and all in the right way. Like it didn't look like, just a CG. Typical CJ, shot. There was some artistry to it that was really kind of cool.
Yep.
So. Yeah. So I think we got it pretty well covered, the episode itself. Just to sum it up for me real quick, just to say it one more time, it is my favorite episode of Discovery so far. And I was like, I pretty strongly felt that before we started this, but the more, I got to actually talk to somebody about it, because like we've talked about before, you and I do not really discuss the episode or how we felt about it when we get on here. So like last week was especially painful because we did it on Tuesday instead of Monday. So there's like all this time where it's like just ruminating in my head, and I love to talk to you about this stuff, and I don't get to do it until we do this. So getting to actually really talk about it with somebody has convinced me that my initial reaction was, I think, correct for me, at least. It's my favorite so far.
Yeah, I have to agree. You talked me into it. This is probably my favorite Discovery so far. So loved it.
Yeah, well, curious to see what you think when you watch it the second time. I know you tend to go second.
Yeah, it'll be Sunday. I'll watch it again.
Yeah, which is a really cool way to do it.
Yeah.
So I'll have to ask you next week. I mean, I'm sure the next episode will be like, for all I know, it'll be the best one, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
So it'll like nothing to even talk about. But as far as this episode goes, but I'll be curious to check in to see if like the second viewing pushes it up or pushes it down. Yeah. Did you see the preview for next week?
Yes, I did.
It looks insane.
It looks insane, fast-paced, lots of drama, lots of action stuff. What we come to expect from Discovery, so.
Yeah, what struck me the most actually was like the first line in the trailer, because I've seen it twice now, was like Stamets saying something like we're stuck in a time loop for the last 30 minutes or something, and I'm like, wow, that is like
that's so true.
So we're gonna get like a cause and effect esque, like stuck experiencing the last 30 minutes. Like who knows? I don't know, but that would be different. We haven't quite gone there yet with Discovery. We haven't had like a high concept, like crazy sci-fi off the wall, like Voyager style, TNG style episode yet. And it sounds like maybe we might get it next week.
So have you listened to or possibly been in a podcast lately?
I did participate in a podcast the other night. So I was honored to be asked to participate in the newest episode of Trek Ranks, top 5 gory moments. So Enterprise Extra, if you're still hanging around here, thank you very much again for having me on and was a great time. And yeah, so I got to do that. I recorded that Friday night. It came out yesterday, late night, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Really tough list to put together. At first, when he first told me about it, I was like, man, this is gonna be really hard. Like coming up with 5 moments that like aren't obvious, like that everybody's gonna pick.
Yeah.
And then the more I started thinking about it, all of a sudden I had like 15 things written down. And I said it in the podcast. I'm gonna say it here too, just for the record, that I sent you a list of like 9 or 10 things, and you responded with one that was like, man, how did I not think of that?
Yeah.
It was a no-brainer. It was Tom Paris pulling his tongue out in Threshold.
Yeah.
So, spoiler alert, that's in the episode. That's one of my 5 picks. I won't reveal any of the others. You have to listen to the show. But that's a Daniel special right there.
Yeah.
Pulling that one out, and yeah, it was a good call because it is disgusting and gory and unforgettable in an episode that is unforgettable. Not necessarily all the right reasons, but
yeah.
yeah, my list would not have been complete without it. So thank you again for.
Always here for it. Yep. If you guys haven't noticed, huge fan of Trek Ranks, so definitely go check that out. Enterprise Extras. Every couple weeks show. It's on the Tricord Transmissions. Definitely go check it out. Awesome show. They've got awesome content, not just Trek Ranks, so definitely check that out.
Yep.
Yep.
Absolutely. What else did I listen to? I listened to I listen to The Edge every week from Trek FM. Our Trek FM's awesome. We talk about that often. Trek FM's kind of big part of why we do what we do. They've inspired us. They're awesome. Their Discovery show, The Edge, puts out a ton of content, and I do a pretty good job of keeping up with that. You kind of spend the week listening to different people talk about the episode of the week, and I pointed them out to Trek Geeks. They're Discovering Trek show, Discovery recap. Talking about the episode of the week again. Really, really good. Really, insightful, positive. Not a bash session. Energetic conversation that's constructive and positive, kind of like we are. Excited about the show and just have a general positive outlook about it. And I appreciate that. And it's a fun listen. But there's tons of stuff out there. There's so much Discovery content. I don't know how you feel about this, but like there's so much Discovery content out there, and the Discovery is so like all encompassing that I do feel like it's kind of cramping some of the other great shows that are out there that I want to listen to. Some of the other great Trek FM shows, for example, that have like specific focuses. I've fallen a little behind on some of them that I'm gonna have to catch up on. Once there's maybe a break in the mid-season. They have a new show, The Briar Patch, about socioeconomics. It's like the most Trek FM show ever. Crazy, like really cool, angle to do an entire Trek podcast about that I haven't really dived into yet, but I'm looking forward to trying. So,
yep.
What about you?
Yeah, so you kind of touched on it. I am trying to distance myself from so much Discovery content, so that's why I like to keep up on the kind of the other shows and stuff. Like I listened to The Journey this week, and so I know there's a lot. And I'll build a touch on it, but there's only one thing from The Edge that I listen to, because I do, like I said, I want to distance myself from so much Discovery content. I don't want to get discovered out, if that makes any sense.
That makes sense.
But I listen to Notes from The Edge. That's C. Brian Jones's show where he talks about references connecting the Prime timeline and the huge literary universe to Discovery, and it's really refreshing because it's only like 30-40 minutes of really deep cuts that all you Trek Live crew members would love. So I definitely recommend, if you're kind of getting like me, getting Discovery out, definitely just check out Notes from the Edge. Definitely a great show. So
yeah. Totally agree too, and kind of going along with that, I'm 100% on board with you. That's one of my favorite 40 minutes of Star Trek podcasts I get every week, and a lot of that is to do with, I think you and I kind of share this in common. We kind of not grew up, but like got into Star Trek podcasting, and content.
He's the grandfather. Yeah.
He is. Chris Jones is like so I want to hear what he has to say because he's so kind of important to my connection to like Star Trek fans out there, because he kind of brought me into it. Like listening to his shows made me want to get on social media and, participate in conversations with people that, loved it. And that's why I'm here doing this. And I know you, Dan, and I know everybody else that I've met, Star Trek related over the last couple of years. So Chris Jones is important to me. I want to hear what he has to say about the show. So when I see him drop something, I pretty well, stop what I'm doing and put that at the top of my list out of respect, because he's the Godfather, like you said.
Yeah. I'll also mention both Bill and I listened to
Larry Nemechek's.
Larry Nemechek's. He had an open house of his
Portal 47.
Portal 47. Yep.
Yep.
It was an awesome show.
Was.
Yes.
Great time.
Yep.
We both are very tempted to, I'm sure, subscribe.
Yes.
It's a good package. There's a lot there. For some two young adults like Daniel and I, it's a little steep. Maybe it's like got to talk ourselves into it.
Yeah.
it's a little on the expensive side, but I have no doubt that it's worth the money. It's Larry Nemechek's the best. I've talked him up many times on this show. That I learn something new every time I hear him. He's another one. Like if I see he drops something, if he's on a podcast, I kind of drop everything and he's like at the top of the list. I go to him, and it kills me that I'm not a subscriber to his thing. And I someday will be. I'm working my way up to it. And this open house that we went to for their 2-year anniversary, and David Livingston was the interview, and he's the all-time leader in directing episodes.
Yeah, he's done everything, every show, everything you could think of. It was so awesome, and it was like that pretty much sealed the deal. Like, yep, I want to definitely work towards getting Portal 47 because it's awesome.
Yep, and that's just one example. Like that's who he gets. Like I like that he interviews people that aren't the guys that you see or the girls that you see on like every Blu-ray. I know you gotta get you those Blu-rays, but like those Blu-ray bonus features that a lot of people participated in are great, and they're important voices that know a lot about the history of Trek. But the people that tend to be on Portal 47 are more deep cut. People that did the grunt work on the show, that were there. He's had. I don't want to speak for him because I don't know exactly who's been on it, but camera operators and sound technicians and extras and set decorators, people that are doing the grunt work and the hard work and the long hours, and we're just there watching this thing happen and not watching, like they were actively creating it, but weren't an actor or writing it. They were doing the day-to-day work of the show, and they have a different perspective than we often hear on a lot of the stuff that we see and listen to. So very tempting, and I will do it someday because he deserves it. He deserves all the attention he can get because he does a great job teaching and just conveying excitement for Trek in his own way. Like he makes me love it all the more because he's so energetic and knowledgeable and excited to share his stuff.
Which we hope to do here at Trek Live. Yep.
Yeah, that's what we want to do. We want to spread enthusiasm and get people to get excited the way we do about it. That's what the best in the business do. That's what Enterprise Extra does, Jim, with Trek Ranks, and like I said, Larry Nemechek, Chris Jones. So that's why we're all here.
Yep. Well, guys, that's been episode 29. Both Bill and I want to thank you. I know there's tons of Star Trek content out there. So we thank you for stopping in and participating, because you guys make Trek Live. So thanks again for being super awesome. And you guys know that the discussion doesn't have to stop here. I know there's stuff we missed, so definitely come over to Twitter, Facebook, down in the description. If you guys have any more questions or just want to keep talking. Thanks for stopping in, guys, and watching. We'll see you next week.
Live long and prosper.